2, 1. So you were showing victory and thumb as well?
Yes, baby. Hi, guys. I was counting down.
Oh, so nice to see you, Joel.
Yeah, good to see you as well.
Good to see you as well.
Mm-hmm.
How's the weather?
It's cold.
Cold.
Let me say, it's a little bit, I'm in New Hampshire, so it's a little bit cold. It's, I don't know, not by a lot of country standards, not very cold, but it's, I do have to wear a coat, so that's enough. Not inside, though. Inside, it's warm.
Are you in your office or home?
Both. I have a home office, if you could see.
Okay, let us...
I'll move this. You can see there's the river right there.
Oh, where is it? And, okay, yes.
Yes, it's in New Hampshire, and so it's a pretty decent... It's not super cold as far as the rest of the world is concerned, but a lot of people complain because there is significant snowfall and things like that. Not right now. It's almost Christmas and there's no snow on the ground right now, but hopefully that will change. There was a little bit. I think in a couple days that will change, but I'm comfortable inside, which is all that matters.
And I remember recently you posted a photo. Where was it? On Facebook or Twitter? On Twitter.
Probably on everywhere.
The water was tumbling, going down, and the moment was so cool. It was on Twitter. And I thought, can you share that picture?
Yeah.
Such a beautiful picture.
Let me see if I can find that picture. I do have an outside, a co-working space I work at as well. This is my home office, but I sometimes work at a different place. And that is at an old textile mill building. There were a lot of textile mills in New Hampshire, and now there aren't any. But all those old mill buildings are now used as apartments and offices and places like that. So putting it in
your mic and your voice.
Yeah.
So nice to hear you again.
Yes. So
you can share your... Yes.
Yeah, sure.
And I remember when I saw this picture, I thought, God, nature probably just doesn't care about anything.
Yes, of course.
Elections, cryptos,
all that kind of stuff.
Zero emotion.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of us need to remember is the world keeps going whether you care or not. And yeah, you got to keep doing your thing.
And good evening, everybody. Today we have Joel.
Mm-hmm.
And Joel is actually quite well known in the crypto community. And as well, one of the friendliest guys.
Oh, if I've had my coffee, yes. If not, not always.
When was the last time?
About 30 minutes ago, a little espresso cup. So,
but when was the last time the friendly Joel was gone?
This morning. You can probably ask my girlfriend. She'll tell you.
Okay, so there is the photo is not coming. Yes.
Yeah, I put it in the private chat, so you can,
in private chat. Okay, I see.
You can find out how to put it on the screen.
So we can share it like this. Awesome, absolutely fantastic. Yes, and here it is. Yep. So
it's pretty nice.
The water is coming down, and just nothing else matters.
Yes, exactly. That'll keep going regardless of whatever we do in life. Things will continue on.
Joel, I was quite surprised. A while ago, I did see that it is mentioned that you are crypto lover. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. But we're not talking about that side yet.
Yes.
What about there was something that said libertarian?
Yes, pretty much. I essentially, as far as I could remember as a child, I knew that freedom is good and not freedom is not good. It's a very simple concept, and I think that in the US, but also in most Western democracies, everyone sort of at least hears the concept that being free to do as you wish is a good thing. That's what makes people happy. If they could do what they want with their life, and if the opposite of freedom is slavery, and that's very bad. And so it's a very basic concept that we all sort of understand, but a lot of people then make a lot of concessions along the way where they say, well, yeah, I agree that this is good, but we should do this, we should control that. And then they start, before you know it, you end up in a sort of an unfree kind of a place. So as long as I remember, I've sort of held that. And also, from a relatively early age, I did some studying on economics. And when you understand where money comes from, why it's created, and things like that, of course, it makes you question all kinds of things like cryptocurrency. That's how I got involved in cryptocurrency, is because of this. But also, when you start to realize that people act not according to as they're told, but people act according to the economic incentives that they have. It makes you understand the world a whole lot better. And it makes you realize that you can't just make a rule and then people act differently. They do act differently, but not in ways you plan necessarily. And so it's sort of like the science. Economics is sort of the science behind the philosophy of freedom. It's kind of like the hard data that you have that shows that some things work. Like, for example, you have a market economy versus a communist nation, and you could just see the numbers on one side are up and the ones are down on the other side. You can make subjective valuations of, well, but I like their quality of life, I like the way they do things. You can have opinions about differences, but where you can't have an opinion is, like, for example, raw economic output, just how much money people get, how much more money people get over time. You see, even if you go to say Africa, you see Botswana, and a stable, relatively democratic system that has had a standards of living go extremely high without a lot of natural resources, not even access to the ocean, etc. You start to see these kinds of things, and it's just sort of like when you start to see the valuation of cryptocurrencies which are much more inflation resistant versus fiat currencies, which are not. You start to kind of see the truth in things, so to speak.
So you slowly, gradually, and very beautifully escaped from the topic of libertarian
Wow.
thinking. And
well, I think it's sort of the same topic. There's a lot of people try to put little boxes around the topics and just say, well, this is only this is different. But when you see it, it's all the same thing.
Is there freedom actually in cryptocurrencies? Is there?
Yes, because anyone can make one from scratch with their own rules and no one can stop them. Now, as far as the ecosystem, there are some regulations depending on the country you're in and things like that. But as far as the crypto world itself, it's without regulation. It's its own thing. And just how people can interact with it might have some. But
it's not only about the regulation, Joel. And I do apologize. Sometimes I might jump into the conversation.
Yeah, no problem.
As lately, I've been thinking quite a lot about this topic. Real independency, decentralization of cryptocurrencies, and is that a real thing or utopia? Maximalists will always say everything is fine, great, fantastic, nothing has been as good as this one. But then we can see, for example, Ethereum. So founders and elite just made a decision. They made a decision, and everything changed. Everything.
Yeah.
Elite made a decision.
Yeah, it's my opinion on that is everything is evolutionary, right? And one thing, a lot of times when we talk about utopia, we talk about perfection. These tend to be goals rather than what will end up happening. And I think that decentralization, obviously, censorship resistance is a principle. It's an ideal. It's something that we should move towards. And I think that in practice, in perfection, it does not exist. In practice, in practice, you can find an imperfect version of it that's still much better than you had before. You can get close. You can do, but you can, for all practical purposes, So, for example, I don't think, let's not like the subject of censorship. I don't think you can create something that is entirely censorship resistant just because, let's just talk about like speech. Let's say you want to say something and everyone in the world doesn't want you to say it. You can, even under the most free society and the most free conditions, there can always be people that can stop you from doing that with enough, with kind of, enough consensus, as it were. So you say something someone doesn't like. So let's just say Twitter kicks you off. They don't like you to say that. And then, okay, well then you decide to use a decentralized Twitter where you can say what you want. But then someone says, they find a node you're running or whatever that connects to this, and they say, well, we're gonna fork that node off the chain. Again, this is considering like a hypothetical decentralized thing. They can just say, we're all gonna not connect to this and not broadcast this message. He can have it on his own node, but no one will reach it because everyone else will purposely fork off the network. And if he creates his own version, no one's going to join it because they don't like him. And then you could say, well, it still gets out there somewhere. And then they could say, okay, all internet service providers will not provide service to this guy. And then he starts you have to create his own solar panel from scratch to try to get electricity. If everyone, we start to go to ridiculous lengths, there is, even in the most perfect decentralized world, or the most we can actually imagine in practical terms, there will always be a way for something like that to happen. Now, that does not mean that censorship resistance either doesn't exist or is not worth pursuing. There's quite a few things. There's quite a lot of difference between that and someone can just stop you from speaking. The thing is, in the kind of crazy example I gave, a whole lot of independent people have to act together with the explicit purpose of censoring this person. And even then, it mostly works, but there might still be some ways he can get his word out. Now, the problem with a centralized system is one person, one entity, one actor can easily do it. It's not, they don't have to go through this big thing and find ways of cutting off access here and there. One person can do it. And so those are the extremes.
Absolutely. That's North Korea and just few countries like that.
Yes.
Nothing else. Everywhere else, there are teams that control other teams.
And so what you do is you push it in the right direction of censorship resistance. You want to make it harder to do. You want to make more things acceptable, or more things able to be published, or more transactions able to be conducted without anyone having a problem with it. And then get as close to that side as you can. And at some point, you got to be, satisfied with where you are. Although I don't think we'll ever be satisfied. I think more can always be better as far as we can achieve.
Yep. And so what do you think about Ethereum? About the Ethereum move? What did it show?
So I believe that in a technical way, from my understanding, Ethereum is completely decentralized as far as the way the technology is built. Okay. Now, I think that it kind of fell victim of a practical centralization effect, where first off, there's the Ethereum ICO. So you have a group of people who are responsible for creating it, end up with a lot of money. And where there's already money and they already have access to the repositories and everything. And so it just tends to follow what they do. And that's just kind of the way it is. And we found the same thing in a much more limited outcome with Bitcoin, where the Bitcoin core team, or whichever group of developers commit access to the GitHub repositories, end up having a significant amount of power and decision making. Now, it's not nearly as perfect because those people have come and gone. There's been different people involved with that position. And there's been a lot of Bitcoin forks. There has been, one big Ethereum fork, but that was more of a single issue thing. It wasn't kind of like a bunch of different versions of Bitcoin like you have now, where if people mistrust what the core developers do enough, and they just can easily fork it and start a new repository, but those original people, or whoever those original people are succeeded by, or whoever holds those keys to the GitHub access, then they tend to have oversized influence. So Ethereum kind of has the same thing, but in a magnified way, where you know who the founder is. He's not anonymous and he didn't disappear. You know who he is. You know who the original founders are. There's a foundation. There's a big pot of money that came from its founding, and that's all around a certain group of people. So theoretically, you could just do your own thing. You don't have to listen to them, but you just tend to actually listen to them.
Well, there was no way not listening to them. They are changing things.
Yes, no practical way for sure.
Absolutely, there is no practical way.
Yeah.
What about Dash? And what are your relationships with Dash?
Yes, so I am an independent content creator and journalist right now. I've done on and off work for Dash over the last few years, and I'm still a big fan of Dash. I think if there's one blockchain project out there, I would say personally rely on the most, and I personally am the most impressed by, it would probably still be Dash. Now, one of these things is when you start to everything's an experiment at this stage, especially since we've never had a decentralized financial system that has this kind of a global reach. And we're trying to create a decentralized financial system with cryptocurrencies. And so, as always, it's evolutionary and people are kind of wiggling their way towards some more decentralized things. But I actually did a video very recently analyzing Dash governance votes, because the way Dash works is just like, and of course this depends on how technical the audience is, but basically it's a proof of work coin like Bitcoin, except that you actually have a voting method for the network, for people who hold coins, who actually have the money to be able to express their desire to vote. So the way it starts with, and there have been some changes along the way that have made this a lot more decentralized, but the way it starts with, in any coin like Bitcoin, developers create the code, miners implement it. If all the miners implement, or most of them, it's pretty clear how it works. If almost no miners implement it, and they implement something else, then it's clear which way it goes. Sometimes it's close enough that there's a split that it ends up being two separate visions and directions. That, again, that's a very basic way of explaining that. At its core, Dash worked the same way, but Dash implemented a decentralized treasury where the stakeholders can vote who gets some money. Every month, new money was available to pay for things like development, and so they could vote to do that. So they would give that to a lot of that at least, to the main development team. And that's how it starts. So if you don't like what they're doing, first you can do two things. First off, you can do a quantifiable stakeholder vote, where you can actually say, this percent of the people involved think you're doing a good job or a bad job. You can actually get a verifiable vote. Whereas with mining, you can have miners signal, but it's a lot of times the signal is kind of a weaker vote. Like, for example, we saw with the SegWit 2x, where 90+% of Bitcoin's hash rate was signaling support for a certain vision that did not end up happening for various other reasons. So it's an easy way to just say, and also, of course, that vote was just on miners. It did not take into account stakeholders in Bitcoin because there wasn't any method for that. So in the beginning, there's two things you could do with Dash. One, you could actually have a vote that's an expression that says, this is what we like, this is what we don't like. And then the second thing, the more real power, is to take away money, to say, I'm not going to pay you anymore because you're doing a bad job. And I want the other developers to get that. And that's how it was for a long time. And so under that thing, we're talking about, so theoretically, quite decentralized. Practically, the areas of improvement are, if first off, the developers can still say, no, we're going to do things this way. And then if you say, well, we'll take away your money. Okay, well, I don't care. We'll work for free. We'll put out this code that we like, and we get enough miners to support it, and then it works. And then, well, it's much harder to do that than on Bitcoin for all those other reasons. It still is a possibility where you don't have that kind of a power. Now, and of course, there's a lot of other things that have something to do with a cryptocurrency project that aren't what one could call on-chain. For example, who owns the keys to the GitHub repository, right? Who actually controls those keys? Who's registered the website, the main website? Who has all access to all the different graphics and things like that are associated with logos? Who has, like, there's a whole bunch of different things, the access to the social media accounts, all that. Like, who has all that stuff that's not part of the cryptocurrency on chain? Now, if you have the main development team, they could say, all right, we're doing what we want. We're taking all the official stuff with us, all the official handles, everything. And then you can have all the stakeholders not like it, but we still got a hold of it. So if you want to fire us, you can, and get a new team. Do you want to pay to develop? You can, but you have to start from zero with a lot of ways. So there is still that bit of power. Now, at some point in the last couple years, there was this system implemented, or this organization created, called the DAO, or Decentralized Autonomous Organization, Irrevocable Trust, which is a legal organization that actually owns the majority of that actually owns all the shares in Dash Core Group, the main Dash company that develops. So there's this legal trust. So now what you can do is you say, I don't like what you're doing, developers. We want you to do something different. And you do a vote that signals something, and then they say no. All right, you can take away their money. And they still say no. Well, now the vote of Dash stakeholders can tell the Dash Trust, the Dash DAO Trust, to remove members legally of this organization, of the development team, and make legally, again, we're talking not crypto world, we're talking real world, the flesh space, as I call it, get them to revoke ownership over these Twitter handles, the website, the GitHub access, all that kind of stuff. There's a way of actually voting for that to happen. Now, of course, in all practical situations, you always have people don't like to do the bigger the action is, the less likely it is that it will take place. So if people don't like what, say, the core team is doing, but they realize they realize that they're going to be stubborn enough, they're not going to want to listen, then they have to think, well, first off, we all have to vote to say you're not doing this. We have to take away their money. We have to get the trust to compel them to remit all this property. And then we have to find other development teams, find someone who'd work. And that's like a lot of work. That's a lot of risk for the coin. The price is probably going to go down in the short term if that happens. Maybe we should just listen to them anyway. There's always that risk where whoever's in charge still gets more power, even if it's a fully decentralized system, because it's just inertia. But I think it's a lot more. It's a lot more of a.
You actually brought an interesting point.
Yes.
You brought up an interesting point that the developers, they have say, and they know they cannot be fired that easily.
Yes.
Especially if they work in an organized group.
Yes, definitely. Especially if they get paid. And of course, the problem is if they don't get paid, that becomes an even bigger problem. But this is where it hits there's no perfect system yet, that you can get a system where things work pretty well. And ultimately, the ability to change things in a massive scale should be, I think, slow. right? Because fast change can be very volatile, can introduce a whole lot of risk. Bad things can happen, spur of the moment decisions. So the process for changing things goes slower. So I looked back on a bunch of governance proposals and just said, well, it's Dash is
Okay.
not a Bitcoin sized project. And so always the smaller the project tends to be, the fewer big players there are in the
Yes.
ecosystem, right? And so I start looking back from the beginning and say, how did votes work? Because largely Dash Core Group, the group that develops for Dash primarily, has gotten a whole lot of approval from people. A lot of people have really liked it. And so, of course, at some point, it's hard to distinguish between, did they get their way because it's a centralized system in practice, or did they get their way because people like the job that they're doing? You can only tell the difference when people don't like the job they're doing. So mostly in the majority of governance proposals, the ideas that they had won out. But there was a few things that did not turn out that way. The two ones that I can think of, the two big cases, were, first off, the logo battle. There was about a
Okay.
couple of years ago, there was a proposed new logo that the Dash Core Group engaged with Ogilvy and Mather, a marketing firm, to develop. And some people in the community hated it, and so they got a branding firm from New York, Tharp and Clark, to develop an alternative logo, which is the one which looks very similar to the old one, but it's a more updated logo. And so they were both put to a vote, and the rogue vote, the community logo, as it were, won by a decent margin. Not a huge margin, but it comfortably won. And then
Okay.
Dash Core Group went with the option they did not like, the one that they did not pick. And that tells us a couple things. First off, it tells us that no, the network does not just implicitly trust them. If they find something that they don't like, they will do something different. And also, it's a relatively lower risk thing, because the development team, they do a lot of things, but the biggest thing that they do that they have a lot of expertise in is code. And this was a non-code related issue where, it's not like, oh, you fire the developers, you just change the graphic, right? It's a little bit of an easier thing. The other thing that took a little longer to implement was the change in PR. Now, in the early days of Dash, there was a couple different attempts to hire a PR team. This was in like 2015, 2016, back in the day. And I looked at those old proposals. I wasn't around back then, but I looked at the old proposals and they failed pretty badly for whatever reason. Now, at some point in 2016, you got the Dash Core team hired a PR firm, Waxman PR, and they used them for many years. And I remember this a little bit more clearly because over time people were not satisfied with the performance of the PR team. And that's not a statement on how well they did or not. I have my personal opinions, but it's just the fact that the community did not like the performance. Dash Core Group did like their performance. And it was a slow process of change in that case, because over months they expressed some people from the community expressed their displeasure. Not much happened. Eventually, the Dash Core team salary proposal, which is just how they all get paid, the whole group gets paid, which was also used at the time to pay the PR team, that started to receive a few more no votes, which it still was like, it went from like a 98% approval to like a 92%. So it was still very high. It still was obviously going to pass, but they started to see the writing on the wall. They started to see that people were displeased, and they figured out it was because they did not like the PR team. And so at some point they separated marketing and PR off of the main salary proposal. And so they split it. And so now the development proposal got fantastic results. The other one still passed for a couple of cycles, but was very controversial as far as the votes. The votes were not there that clear. And then over time, it finally became where the votes got close enough and discussion went around to let's actually hire a different PR team, or let's see if we can. And so at some point, a new PR team, Shift PR, was brought in, and there was 2 competing proposals in the same month, one for the old one, Waxman PR, one for the new one, Shift. So the network can actually pick between the 2. And the old one got destroyed, like almost no one voted for it, and then it went away. And so that wasn't quite a simple process of doing something, but it was the Dashcore team really liked this team. Over many cycles, slowly they got it. The votes hit to where they realized that they needed to make this able to be an explicit decision. And when the explicit choice was made, that team was completely shut out. And so that's another case of over time, people did not trust the core team's judgment on this one subject. However, it's also not code related. So far with the code, they have been quite trusted. Now, there's
that is a leap of faith.
Yes, it's a little bit of a leap of faith. Now, absolutely. There is something, and it's harder to make judgments about governance like this without big disagreements. And this is not a case with a disagreement yet. So I understand it's a little harder to see. There is now a separate developer group in the Dash ecosystem. There's always been community development projects.
Yes.
There's always been a few like, I'm going to build this one app, I'm going to go away. Or a volunteer developer who just, because an open source project, works on the code and then etc. But there's one group called the Incubator, which is founded by the former architect of the Dash core team. Is in one could call, maybe again titles are a little bit strange, but one could call the old school lead developer who ended up leaving the core team later. He created his own development group specifically to build decentralized applications for the main Dash protocol. And
okay, that's good. Yes.
And that group has been funded a few months in a row. Most interestingly, I believe it was the first or one of the very first proposals to ever get a unanimous vote, not a single no vote. And none of the old development team, which is probably still working right now, Dash Core Group, they never got a unanimous vote ever. So you can see that now there's competition in the development teams. It's not for the same exact field of development protocol, but there's separate development teams that are both working, and the new community one, as it were, seems to be more popular than the still very popular main development team. So it's kind of interesting to analyze how this works.
What are the main targets Dash teams want to achieve? What are the main things? As dApps, I would not see them as the main targets. I would see them as waste of time. Really, they can exist, and that's awesome, brilliant. But Dash is digital cash, is it?
Yes.
And all you've got to do is just make that part stronger.
Yes, exactly. And that's what the core team is mostly focused on, is just that. Now, this is where, we go back to back in 2015, Dash's founder, Evan Duffield, gives some presentation at a Bitcoin meetup in Amsterdam saying, the way cryptocurrency works today will never be widely used. We need to make something better. I have this project I call Dash Evolution, and it'll make everything easy to work. It'll fulfill the original vision for digital cash. And that was the vision back then. Then over time, they started to figure out how to make this vision a reality. And somewhere in the 2017 to 19, especially time frame, there was a lot of research into how to actually do these basic things, which are usernames and friends list on the blockchain, and how do we get that done? And the more research into how to actually do this was done, the more they realized how much of a difficult task it was to do it right, to do it correctly, because there's a lot of easy ways you could get it done, but it would make a lot of compromises. And so they realized that in order to make this doable and not compromise anything, to not have it, well, this doesn't really work this way, or, oh, it's semi-centralized, or however that works, they had to build a whole new sort of platform in order to host everything. And so basically, that's one of those reasons why some people expected the Dash username setup to be out somewhere in the late 2018. And now it's like at the end of the year this year that things are finally getting out. And I'm alpha testing.
Wow.
So I'm alpha testing the username wallet right now. That's on a test net. And so I can actually see it. It looks really cool. It works really well, but doesn't send real Dash yet. But so it's taken a long time.
Oh, so it is in alpha already.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I do remember we were talking about it. 7 years ago? Yeah, 7 years ago maybe. Yeah.
And so
things take time, of course.
That's something that I've been looking into as well, has been what other people, because now there's competitors in this space, right? Before, no one was even thinking about this. But now there's a bunch of different projects that are trying to make cryptocurrency easier to use in a relatively decentralized way. And so that's been my recent task. I've been running around interviewing people all over the place, talking about what their project's doing, how is it different. And I just a couple hours ago, I uploaded a video on interviewing the guy who runs ENS, or the Ethereum name service, on how they do it. So it's pretty fascinating to see the way this thing develops. But
yes. you can shoot me a link over private chat, and I'll put it on the public chat. Yes,
let me throw this one. But anyway, it's a very fascinating thing to watch the space develop, because I feel like Dash has been one of those projects that has decided to do everything right. And by right, I don't necessarily mean I don't necessarily mean it's the best. I tend to think it is always the best way, but it's in they don't want to make any short-term compromises. They'd rather do long-term things. And now, like, as I'm starting to understand how these things work better, there could have been a few ways of implementing usernames and things like that easier, faster, but it wouldn't have been revolutionary. It wouldn't have changed things. It would just have made things easier. And then you still have to be like, well, this isn't that good. And now the argument then is, should there have been a simple, kind of easy to use, not very good, imperfect solution that then you release it then and you have to do it again in a few years, like do it for real? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question, but that's just kind of the way things worked out. And it's pretty interesting to see. Just like every cryptocurrency payment system needs all kinds of things. Like they need security, they need speed, they need scaling, all this kind of stuff. And then the usability side of things needs a whole bunch of different things too.
So good evening, everybody. Now it is your time to ask. I've got tons of questions. Seriously, Joel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exaggerating. I really, really wanted to talk to you. And then when I heard that you actually decided, so Dashforce, you were part of Dashforce,
mm-hmm.
yes? Or you were founder of Dashforce?
No, it was one of the early people involved with that, but yeah.
Okay. So, and have you left Dashforce?
Yes. So Dashforce was dissolved. It
was
an early kind of it basically over time it started as a what one could call like a community initiative to mostly give support for Dash on social media. That was the first thing it did. Then it evolved to do stuff like incentivize meetups and then run news and then try to do media and PR and all that kind of stuff. So basically, everything that is not media and PR was determined that it was that kind of Dash grew out of that we didn't want to be doing that anymore. And so then basically what the median PR bit remained, but under different names. So I decided to do independent because I was always doing more of the journalism type side of things. And I decided to basically do that independently now, do it, as my own. And then my partner, Mark, has been behind the Dash newsroom and PR. And so he has a separate proposal that one could call the successor of Dash Force, I guess. But it just, got rid of that old name, got rid of the old everything, and just now we're focused on more specific things.
And what would they be?
Yeah, so as I said, Mark is taking over the media and PR directly for Dash, and I'm doing independent news
directly
and things.
Directly for Dash.
Yes.
I thought Dash voted for monthly budgets.
Yes.
And they did not have in-house, except
yeah, I mean,
our mutual friend, yes, from Switzerland.
It gets a little bit complicated sometimes when anyone can submit a proposal and get something funded. I can find the news right here. We go.
Okay.
We
have a couple of questions. I will definitely put them up. My apologies. Seriously, I will need to push myself down to not ask. Just, Joel, could you stand up a bit higher? So when you see, and this is not the year.
There we go. Is that better?
One second. Let me take off the thing, and here we go. You are not born in 1984, no?
No. Close enough, but no.
And he does not work for the Ministry of Truth, no?
No, but this is, I bought this shirt from WikiLeaks. It says 1980. Yes. Okay. And I use Dash, of course. The WikiLeaks store takes Dash.
Yes.
And it says 1984 is not an instruction manual. And basically, it's an allusion to the novel 1984, which described a totalitarian state. And it basically alludes to that was a work of fiction to make us afraid of such a state, not a guide to tell us how to do it, because we should not do that. And so it's been pretty interesting to see just how many people, young people, like teenagers and things like that, have seen the shirt and had a positive reaction.
Really?
You think that it'd be like maybe the older generations, but no, a lot of people. It's I guess freedom never goes out of style completely, right?
Oh, come on! And George Orwell and 1984. That is a classic. Okay, let us. Here's a question from London.
Yes, what am I forecast for crypto next year?
And it definitely applies to the price.
Yes. So I do have a forecast, but that's not my area of expertise is in the technology and how it works and who's using it and how to use it and who gets to use it and how easy it is to use, all that stuff. That being said, I have friends who are smarter than me who analyze markets, and I have heard that the top of the bull and the bottom of the bear markets in crypto are relatively consistent as far as when they occur, the amount of time between them. And supposedly it's within a couple weeks on either side. Like, it's very reliable to predict it. And so that being said, it appears to be that next fall will be the top of the bull market. That's what I hear from if history repeats itself. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. And of course, I would expect it to be higher than the last, bull market. So like Bitcoin is close to 20,000 today. I don't think it will be only 20,000, it'll probably be several times higher than that. I don't know. But again, I have not investment advice. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm repeating some stuff I saw, but based on, the way where things are, and The other X factor that I did not fully anticipate until this year is the rate of inflation for fiat currencies, because I've seen some statistics like 30% of all the dollars ever printed have been printed this year. I do know that the consumer price index in the US in, I believe it was June, rose more, as in the cost of everything went up faster than in 1 month than any time before up to 1991. So it's like a 19-year high in how fast the prices are going up because the dollar is being inflated. So I see a lot of economic indicators that even if the same Bitcoin can buy you the same thing next year, it'll probably be worth several times more just because the dollars will be worth several times less. So I think that, of course, can be a catalyst for a lot of people moving into cryptocurrency. There's like a lot of things happening right around the same time that kind of make me think that, yeah, this could be an explosive next year.
And what about the Dash? What is the price of Dash right now?
I gotta check. It was in the high 90s last time I checked. Let me go turn on a light real quick.
Oh, your light is actually very good.
Sorry. Hopefully that's better.
Well,
anyway. Yes. So it's hard to tell. Now, part of the way, there's been a lot of discussion on this too. Part of the way Dash is structured with people who are incentivized to hold their coins in masternodes.
Yes.
And at the same time, you still have miners. The way the effects on the price seem to have been, and there's a huge long discussion on this that the Dash Core Group CEO, Ryan Taylor, put out a whole PowerPoint presentation and stuff on this. It apparently, in bull markets, Dash shoots up in price faster than other coins. And in bear markets, it goes down faster in price. So because of the tokenomics, things tend to work like that. So I would probably expect things to be doing significantly better, towards the end of next year. And
but the price is low. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would think so.
I am very surprised. I am very surprised actually about the price.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps sub 100 all the time.
It's one of those things where we have a combination of things. So cryptocurrency, no one uses it. I use it. No one else. No, not quite. That's not quite that bad, but very few people use it. And price movements are mostly determined by speculation rather than people doing it for real world use. And as such, if people jump into something, they get interested, there goes all the interest. And if the interest goes, you could have the exact same amount of real world usage or even more. And then there's a little bit of difference. So all that to say, in 2017 was quite the hype cycle for Dash because
1200, 1600, what was it?
Yeah, it got up to 1600.
1600. How many masternodes do you have then?
I've never had a masternode. I'm not that kind of a baller. Kidding.
But
also, I probably wouldn't tell you even if I did, because then you'd have to kill me.
Okay.
Yeah, but
later.
Yes, but in terms of when the price in 2017, it was, I believe, like $10 per Dash at the beginning of the year, and went up to 1600 at the end. I believe the lowest this year it was like 38, and so I don't know where we're going from there. 38, something like that. And so it's interesting because I think there was a lot of expectations behind Dash usernames being out in the middle of 2018 or the end of 2018 that fueled a lot of interest. That combined with you had people who bought like a masternode for like 10,000 USD. And then they were like, oh, wow, I could be a multimillionaire just with this one thing. And then that had a lot of people buying into it. A lot of FOMO, fear of missing out, jumped in there, and then goes up and down again. And I kind of like at its cheapest, Dash was like a masternode was like 38 to 40,000 USD still at the bottom of this year.
Wow.
And that's still a high price point. So it's not like next time people would be like, well, I can still get in. It's like maybe a little bit richer people. But I still think that when prices start to go up and people realize, oh, I could stake this and I could get a lot out of it, well, that would be great. Although the staking world has significantly changed.
So regarding the FOMO
Mhm.
and masternodes, and I do apologize for interrupting. The
Yes.
question was, have you got the numbers of masternodes that you had 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and now?
0, 0, 0.
Guys, no, you haven't got a clue, no?
No.
Do you follow the charts? Are you gaining masternodes or losing masternodes?
The network.
Yes.
I thought you meant personally.
No, not
So
your.
you're talking about me like I'm like this super rich person. I'm gonna put Roger Ver to shame, and yes. So let me see.
And that would be really interesting, as when the Bitcoin started rising up, I would expect, and I did expect, lots and lots of people, most of the people, just drop off everything they have and jump into the Bitcoin and just hold. Just hold that.
Yeah. So I will send you a chart right here.
Okay. You can actually share the screen. Did you know that?
Can I?
Of course you can.
Let me see.
This software is absolutely awesome. StreamYard. By the way, we stream with StreamYard. You can download your audios after that, videos, all the good stuff. The best streaming solution. Seriously, and we are not affiliated with them.
Of course.
Okay.
Oops. There we go.
That's fine.
Yes. So what you can see right here is this is the all-time count for masternodes, right? From January 15th. And see this line here was a predicted equation. As you see, it hasn't been completely lived up to the predicted equation, but it is still pretty much of a curve similar to this.
Yes.
So let me just put it to last year. It's a little bit up and down and up and down. And 90 days, and then the last 7 days.
So 90 days, that was the question. So what about 90 days?
So what happened right here is there was a significant upgrade that happened that basically it kicked off all masternodes that did not upgrade. So somewhere around here, they had time to upgrade. At a certain point, they just start to be orphaned off the network. And so that's why it drops very sharply. And then now it's bouncing back because a lot of those same people are updating their software. And so there are some people who track collateralized masternodes versus active masternodes, meaning they just track the money and not the actual node being operational. This is the actual node being operational. So I don't have that, but that is pretty interesting.
No, that's good. That's good. As I did expect that the nodes would go down. As people would be selling off Dash and buying it back later on.
Yes, I mean it does kind of fluctuate a little bit with that, but
thank you, Joe.
It is interesting to see that there was a few different things as well, such as one large holder took out a lot of loans based on using the masternodes as collateral, and then the price hit a certain low point, and then it was liquidated in a large scale. So that happened at the beginning of the year, about end of last year, beginning of this year. And so there were some issues like that. Hey, good evening, Victors.
Good evening. And here's a question, a different question.
Did I know, or maybe I heard, what is Yearn Finance and what is at Coinbase as well as current price?
If you do understand the question, if you don't understand the question, then we can move on.
There's a couple of bits with that. I don't know much about Yearn Finance. I do know it's one of these DeFi systems, and I'm more or less of a DeFi skeptic, not because I don't believe in the possibilities of a decentralized financial system like that. I think the reason why DeFi has become very popular is because people are using it to basically gamble. Basically, they're taking out loans, collateralized on other loans, and just hoping to get better yield all the way up. And then if something bad happens, they can lose everything. And so that's one of those reasons why I think it's one of those systems, kind of like an ICO, that needs maturity. It's not a bad idea, but it needs maturity. It needs to grow up. The idea of an ICO is great. You can just sell tokens to raise capital for anything, and anyone can buy it. Anyone can crowdfund. It's a great idea. The problem is too many people just started saying, they got into the mindset of, I can promise anything and I have no obligation to investors. And then the investors say, I don't care what this guy's promising, but if it sounds cool enough, I know as soon as I buy those tokens, they're going to go up in value. Then I get to sell them to another sucker.
As long as I sell them off for the higher price.
Yes. And so it's one of those things. I think that DeFi is one of those things that's going to be very exciting. And then a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money on it. And then several years later, it's going to come into maturity and actually be useful, but no one's going to talk about it. It's just going to be quietly be part of the ecosystem. But, because no one's making and losing huge amounts of money, then no one will talk about it.
Talking about other coins, Caspar is with his, and I will use Litecoin from his comment. And what about the Litecoin? Joel, recently I decided to take an evening off and to watch all the Bitcoin and Friends, the cartoons.
Yeah.
I absolutely love them. I've been so busy lately, like mentally, and decided that's it. I need to watch these cartoons.
Yeah.
And then I immediately on the second series, I remembered why I dropped off. There is so much maximalism. There is hate and disrespect towards many other players. Dash, not Dash. The Litecoin is shot. Charlie Lee is involved only with shit coins and like physically. What do you think about Litecoin, Bitcoin and Friends, and Bitcoin maximalists? You can go any direction.
Yes. So,
thank you.
As always with these kinds of things, nuance is your friend, right? It's easy to come up with this is good, this is bad, and life is more complicated than that. So let me explain that regarding Litecoin specifically. Litecoin works. It does what Bitcoin does.
Absolutely.
Right? It does what Bitcoin does, but has 4 times faster block interval. So therefore, it has 4 times the on-chain capacity. And it has a different mining algorithm and has a much higher supply. But other than that, it does the basic things that Bitcoin does and has been around for a while. It has a lot of integrations on exchanges. There's some decent liquidity involved. So given those facts, I can't say anything bad about Litecoin from that perspective. And if you look at the transactions, there's between like 35 and 40,000 regular transactions every day. Recently, there's been more because there's a game called Lightbringer, which puts all the in-game options on chain. And so for a while, it was having over 100,000 transactions a day because everyone was playing the game, and that was all going on chain. But that's since died down. So it's somewhere around 60,000, but like 20,000 of those are from the Lightbringer game. So as far as everything else, it's like around 35 to 40,000. And so it's getting used more than a lot of projects, right? So these are all the things I have good to say about it. The things that I don't necessarily like about it is that I don't feel like it brings a lot of extra innovation to the game, right? I don't think it's not fundamentally different than Bitcoin in enough ways, and it copies the innovations that happen on Bitcoin. And I don't think it necessarily needs to exist and brings anything new. So I'm definitely not excited about Litecoin at all, but it works too, right? So it's kind of like, yes and no. I understand why people say it's like crap because developmentally, nothing really good has happened from it except for things that are being implemented on Bitcoin sometimes got implemented on Litecoin first.
Exactly.
Yes.
Real life testnet. Real life testnet.
Yes, live testnet, and
yes, live testnet.
So that's kind of like what it does. Does that justify it having anywhere near the market cap it does? No, but it's one of those things where, as a speculative investment, I think it's complete. I have nothing good to say about it. As a practical tool, it seems to work okay. It seems to be okay. So that's kind of my nuanced opinion.
Yes.
Anything that allows people to transact in free and censorship resistant money is always going to be great in my book. I'm always going to be very happy about that. And it does. So I'm happy about that. I don't think it's special though, especially since, and of course on that subject, I don't necessarily think the Bitcoin forks are special, that they do the same thing as Bitcoin,
Okay.
but more transactions, some small other differences, but mostly just more transactions. And I think that that's good, but I'm not super excited about it because it's not really new territory. I'd like to do that plus more. So for example, let's take another project like Decred. Decred is doing a lot of things similar to Bitcoin, but a lot of things different. They're changing things in governance. They're different consensus algorithms, like things like that. They're innovating. And even if whether you like the way they're innovating or not, it's something new. It created something new. And that's one reason why I will never really be extremely critical of Ethereum, because even if it works or if it doesn't work, it's pushing the space they're building new things. And so even if those things don't work out, it's still innovating. And so that's the key concept there.
Have you ever met Charlie?
I didn't really talk to him, but I went to a conference and he was there and just hi. That's it.
He seems really quiet.
Yes.
From the stories.
He's a little bit of a shit talker online though. He likes to insult other projects.
Ooh.
And so for example, he was talking mad things about Dash for a long time. And then
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow.
And a couple of developers then after years of this, decided to criticize him back. And then there was a lot of drama and a lot of articles written about him. And he said, sorry, I don't want any trouble anymore. I'll shut up now. Yeah. So
I remember when I discovered Joel, cryptos, I'm still ashamed. I said some nasty things to Fluffy Pony. We had few guests who explained that he is absolute rubbish, and I just got influenced by their thoughts.
Yes. Well, he doesn't like me very much.
Up to this day, I feel so ashamed of that. God.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in this is a great segue into maximalism. I think a lot of people say things that they don't really think through. Like, oh, this is shit. This is great. Like, you're just a scammer. Like, that's a great word is scam, because scam is a real thing. There are actual scams out there. But you have to understand what is a scam. Because a scam is something that intentionally deceives people in order to take their money.
Yes.
And there's some, like, one could say something like BitConnect is the classic scam, right? Now, there's a lot of things that aren't good, that still aren't scams. There's been a lot of discussion about Hex, for example.
Okay.
I don't know too much. I've read some things on Hex. It does not interest me at all. But I do know some friends that like it a lot, and most people think it's a scam. Now, it seems to be a little bit of a pyramid scheme where it relies on new people coming in to buy it, to put up the value and things like that. Which is not a good thing, but it's also not necessarily a scam if you know it's a pyramid scheme before you get in there. If someone lies to you and says it isn't, then it's a little bit of a
pyramid scheme. It is a scam. That's it.
Possibly, yeah. That's where you have to be careful on when you talk about intent and things like that. Now, obviously, I think Bitcoin has been one of the greatest innovations of our time. That being said, a lot of people have scammed people with Bitcoin by promoting it in ways that I think are dishonest, right? And so Bitcoin could be amazing, but you could still scam people with Bitcoin based on how you do it. Like, for example, if you start saying Bitcoin is peer-to-peer digital cash, it's money, its transaction fees are low, you start talking about that kind of stuff. You sell it like that. Well, that was Bitcoin maybe 2016 or prior. That's not Bitcoin today. And you shouldn't make false promises, because then someone's going to try to use it and it'll, fiat is a scam. Yes, I agree. And so also when people say Bitcoin is going to go up in price, buy it now because it's going to go up. I don't like the way that's said. It's probably true, right? Because it's a technology that is still in its infancy. Not a lot of people use it yet. It has room to grow. And also the fiat world is probably going to start crumbling at some point. It's going on the way down. So therefore it's a good bet that Bitcoin will go up. But to just say you're going to get rich by buying this stuff, that I think that's, you don't know that. And that's very dishonest. It's a very scammy thing to do, to try to get people to just buy Bitcoin.
And there is percentage of people who act like fortune tellers, and they act that they know everything that will happen in the future, and it is impossible to know anything that will happen in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let us look at it from the other side. Is it? Can we actually ask ourselves, was money a great invention?
I think absolutely. Now,
one of the best things that has happened to humanity.
Yes.
And
now here's the funny thing. And this is something I like to think about. I spend some time thinking about, because money evolves. And that's one reason why I'm a big fan of precious metals, but I don't believe there's anything uniquely special. Like, a lot of people think about gold like it's something given by God. Like, God says this has value, here you go. There's reasons why it developed the value and became useful. Gold is a technology. It's a raw resource. Yes, it's also a technology. And like any money, what money does is it is a communication tool. People have value. They value things inherently. And so whenever if I want to trade to you these fun Dashi glasses, if I want to trade those for a book on your wall, that communicates the value between us, right? That you want these, I want those. This is how much we value things. But it's kind of an imperfect language. Barter, trade, is an imperfect language for communicating value. And so the history of money has just been finding better tools to communicate that value, that belief that we have. All value is belief, right? And so if I believe this to be valuable, it is valuable. If we all believe this to be valuable, it will be valuable. If we do not, we do not. And so, for example, when you see the comparison right here, this is a 50 euro note.
50 euro. Okay.
Right?
Joel is in the United States.
Yes.
Okay.
And then this 500 Venezuelan bolivars.
Beautiful.
Now, like, if you compare them, I kind of like the bolivar better. It looks better to me, right? It's longer. It's thinner. It doesn't have this weird little reflect. I don't know. And there's a person on it. There's no person on this one.
Yes.
But this is worth almost nothing. And this one, I could get a nice meal out somewhere probably. So
definitely,
why does this have value and that isn't? And of course, you could go there's a very long explanation for that. But the very short this very short explanation is belief. People believe this is worthless. People believe that this is worth something, and therefore it is. And it's an idea. And the technology for the collective idea, the idea that we all have, we all agreed on this idea that this has value and this isn't. The technology for storing that idea and communicating it to others, that is what money is. So what happened was, of course, you had a scarce unit of account, a scarce thing. For example, silver, right? You have something scarce. I swear I did not prepare for this. It's just what I have on my desk. But you have something scarce that is easily identifiable, that has other purposes, and you start using that in substitute for your ideas. because we don't read each other's minds. And you start doing unit of count and stuff like that. And then coinage, creating coins out of precious metals, is a technology. It's a way of clearing a trade, where if I want to trade with you, I could transfer the same piece of silver to you, and it's not useful because you'd be like, all right, let me take it, let me weigh it and decide, all right, this. But if it just has printed by this mint, it's minted by this mint, this much, you just look at it and you take it, right? It's a facilitating technology. And then, of course, you evolve with paper money as a paper money backed by precious metals, where you have, this is a certificate of paper. You can put it in your wallet, and this means this is 5 ounces of gold right here. I'll exchange it to you. Anytime you can go get it, but it's just hard to transport and carry on big pieces of gold. So you have the paper behind it. And so that's the evolution of money. It keeps going. Now,
money is now becoming electronical thing. That's it.
Yes.
And many countries are slowly pushing out coins and notes.
Yes. Now, where we go to the fiat problem, where fiat is a scam, I would say, I think that's a pretty good description of it, because all these notes did not have value before they had something scarce behind them, like a precious metal. And then at some point, they just took that away and kept going with the money. And that, it's kind of being sold as though they didn't do that. And so people who believe something has value because it used to have value when it had a scarce asset behind it, and now they're buying into that, but it doesn't have that anymore, that is kind of a little bit of a scam. And so, and it's not new either. Back in the Roman days, people used to do clipped coins, where they take the same coin, they take little pieces off of it, and then just say it's worth the same. It's like, no, that's a scam. It's not worth the same. It's so,
and kings especially were doing that.
Yes, that's basically
into the silver, into the gold. Yes.
Yeah, it's money printing. And so essentially that's the problem with money today, is you have a digital ledger that someone controls, that, or because basically that's what fiat currency is a digital ledger, although there are paper representations and stuff, but it's all, digital ledger someone controls, and then someone can decide that there's more or less of these. They can have fewer, they can have more, and we don't get to decide that. And if we have some, the value can go completely away. And so, for example, I don't think that printing new money is necessarily a bad thing. But imagine this. What if the coin supply got inflated by 10% a year? That's relatively high inflation. Now, what if you got 10% interest per year on that money? What if when they printed it, they gave you your portion? So, say you have these 50 euros, right? And they print, so now it's 10% inflation. What if you get an extra 5 euros at the end of the year of the new money they printed? Here you go. You wouldn't be that mad about inflation, would you? Because each year would be worth less, maybe, but you would get more of them, so you're happy. The problem is they print that, but then they keep it and you don't get it. So they're just moving the value away from you without your consent, and you can't do anything about it. Now, what if, and that's the thing that makes it more, I guess, disheartening, is there's already taxation, right? You already pay taxes. You already have someone say, all right, you get paid this much, we're going to take 20% or whatever it ends up being. We're going to take out of those units. So they're already taking that. Then they're printing more money. So they're already taking another chunk out of it without telling you. No, you still get to keep this. They're scamming you by saying, you only had to pay this. Now here's what you have left. But what you have left, they're taking value out of that too. And then they're taking out loans with your name on them, right? As in, national debt. They're taking out loans in addition and just getting more and more money that you didn't agree to either. So there's all this value transfer away from the people. And I recently saw a video with, I believe it was the Canadian finance minister, who's started talking about people's saving accounts, that some people had a lot of savings,
Okay.
and called them preloaded stimulus, and was talking about ways of unlocking preloaded stimulus to help the Canadian economy. Basically, she's talking about ways you could steal people's money from their bank accounts.
Wow.
And that happened in Cyprus, didn't it?
Oh yes, it did. Oh yes, it did. If you had 100,000 plus, then
yeah, that's another way they're just trying to take money from you. And
in Canada, who would think?
I mean, the world's a crazy place, right? That's the thing that I think that a lot of people, whenever you have people who start talking about freedom and start talking about, oh, Federal Reserve is a scam and, Fiat is a scam, all this stuff, a lot of people dismiss them as crazy people. But if you think about it, why it should be, if taxation is honest, you should be able to just pay taxes and be done with it. That's how an honest thing works, is says, this is what we're giving you. This is how much it costs. And then that's it. Transaction's over. You want to live in a society that does these things. They say, all right, this is what you got to pay to do this. Again, I'm just breaking it back down to the way it, you could say it should work. Here's how much you owe every year. This is what your rate is. All right, here you go. And then business is concluded. You might say, well, I'd like more choice on whether or not to participate in the system to begin with. Oh, well, that's too much. You're being inefficient. Oh, well, I didn't vote for that. There's a bunch of problems you still have, but at least you pay something for something. At least it's honest. But then when you have, semi-honest, whatever, it's, you have that going on. But then you start adding things like national debt, where there's debt accrued that you still have to pay for at some point. It's like future taxation, sort of. But it's like, well, this isn't what you owe. Well, it's this other thing. And then the worst part is, of course, printing money, where you did not agree to it, and they're just taking money that they didn't, if they wanted the money, they should have just asked for it and said, okay, you're going to have to pay 60% of your salary in taxes now, 70%. If they want that much money, they should say that and be honest, and then you get to see it. But it's a dishonest way of getting more money out of you, which is why I believe that cryptocurrency is such a revolutionary thing, because it allows people to have to pay taxes honestly again.
So, and you are in New Hampshire.
Yes.
What was it called?
Yes, New Hampshire.
Is that an artificial state, or?
No,
I understand it is kind of free state, or
yes.
I can't use this.
It's one of the 50 U.S. states.
Okay.
And it was one of the original 13 U.S. colonies after independence, and way back in the day. And it's based on the way things are structured. There's a lot of local autonomy between states. So, for example, most places assess there's a federal income tax that the federal government, the national government gets. But most states, almost all states, have a state income tax as well. And New Hampshire has no state income tax. So whatever people pay is just to the feds, not to the state government. Also, almost every state has a sales tax. I don't know what sales taxes are like in Europe. I believe I saw when I was on some receipt in France that said 20% or something for the sales tax.
VAT, value added. Yes, value added.
Yes. So the equivalence would be sales tax in U.S. states. Some places have 5 to 9% or something. New Hampshire has 0% sales tax. So whatever amount you pay is just straight there.
I have a company as well in Delaware. I was so surprised I was sent a bill. You need to pay franchise tax or something.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yes.
Franchisee, not franchisor. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's always a million different things, but New Hampshire has very few of any of these taxes. So
do you pay taxes? You are a libertarian. Yes. Well,
let me answer.
It is a question from Helmut to Joel. Really, I haven't got a clue how your state works. I'm so curious.
Yes. So let me answer a little bit more in the broader and hypothetical terms. There is basically everyone who makes money is supposed to pay taxes, right? And if you don't, then you go to prison. That's pretty much the way things work everywhere in the world. Of course, it's not. There's many steps before it. There's like, oh, you didn't pay enough. You get this. We got to pay back, whatever. And of course, there's plenty of people in society who are, I guess, below the tax bracket or whatever that don't really pay, or if they do file for taxes, they get more back than they give, right? And there is no one who has no money, right? Some people have almost no money, or they receive, assistance from a government or something like that. But even those people, whenever you buy something, if you buy something with sales tax, part of that goes, right? If you pay rent at a place, you might not pay anything directly, but the building owner has to pay taxes. And so they have to raise their prices high enough so they can afford to pay taxes. So you still have to pay taxes anyway. Basically, there's no way around it in, the modern world. There's ways to get less of it, right? So for example, one interesting thing is, do you know where Puerto Rico is?
Puerto Rico,
Yes.
yes.
And it's an interesting situation because it's part of the United States.
Yes, it is.
But is not a U.S. state. And if you live, it's not one of the 50 U.S. states. It's a territory. It's a slightly different classification.
Okay.
So if you live in Puerto Rico, you don't vote for president. Like, you can't vote. There's no representation.
Wow. Okay, cool.
But you also don't have to pay federal taxes or some federal taxes. So for example, I know, do you know who Peter Schiff is?
No.
He is I guess famous precious metals guy, Schiff Gold. He was he predicted the 2008 financial collapse pretty well, and he's a pretty famous guy. He loves gold and silver, but he hates Bitcoin for some reason. It's a little bit strange, but anyway, he's from the U.S., but he lives in Puerto Rico now, and he does not vote because he can't. But he also gets out of a whole lot of taxes, and there's as the saying goes, no taxation without representation. Well, there's no representation, so they don't have to pay those kind of federal taxes. So it's basically, there's things you could do like that can lessen that, but it's kind of like saying, I want to live in a world where nothing I do involved anyone being harmed in any way, or any kind of being exploited, anyone harmed. You can do that in some areas where you can say, okay, well, I'm only buying local produce where I know the farmer who grew the produce, and I know the animals and all that. I know how that worked. That's good. I'll try to buy local crafts, local everything. I'll try to do stuff that live my whole life so that my economic impact does not involve someone getting harmed. Now, there's always going to, that's just like decentralization. That's a goal rather than a something that's perfectly achievable in the short term, because what goes into your phone, right? What kind of cobalt mine somewhere in the world had exploited workers working on it that you don't know what to do? Who assembled the phone, and what were the conditions like? And a lot of that will just be hard to know. But also in the shorter term, there's probably something nasty somewhere touching some good or service that you have, and of course, what happens when you use US dollars, and by using that, your part of that value is going to go pay for war, because the government prints money and uses that to drop bombs on countries and stuff. And like, if you buy something with dollars, are you supporting the war machine? It's like all these strange ethical questions come about. But basically, if you can reduce that, the better in my view, because I think if you can take money away from that machine, you still have it if you want to put it back into society in a productive way. So let's say you pay 40% of your income in taxes. If you manage to get that down to like 20%, that extra 20%, you can still pay for public services, pay for, social safety net, pay for things for people with that extra money. It just, now you have the choice on how to use it, and you could probably do it in a more efficient way. And you can make sure none of it goes towards, bombing people. And the same thing goes with the fiat system.
Well. People
Hmm.
are not going to give away their money willingly.
Yeah.
Joel, we have to draw a line somewhere. People are people. People are people. And they will not be giving away money by themselves. They'll not be paying voluntarily money for the schools, for the hospitals, for anything,
Oh yeah, except that they do. That's one thing I noticed is, so I didn't receive any government money
Okay. Yes.
for my own schooling. I was schooled at home for a lot of it, and
Okay.
then in the university level, also without government funding, was managed to get through university.
Yes.
Also, without incurred debt. So there's one area, right? Around where I live, especially in a small area like this, there's a lot of roads that are privately maintained completely, and a lot of communities that the community gets together and does it. In fact, that's how I grew up with my parents in the north of Mexico. That's how things worked. Is the communal roads were not maintained by the government at all, and so the local farmers got together every year and hired a tractor to come and grade the road and make it work. And every once in a while, you had someone who did not want to pay their fair share, and so everyone just had to pay without that person. But then they did not want to do business with that person, and they suffered social consequences
in small communities.
Yes, I think
but then again, there can be some evil bastards who can take the control over that community.
Yes, and that's one of those struggles with freedom and decentralization. Is the looser it is, sometimes the easier it is to be controlled completely. And so that is a couple of interesting examples of that are, of course, with the Bitcoin development, where you had the few companies such as Blockstream that had undue influence over the direction of the entire decentralized project, just because they did not have a internal funding mechanism like something like Dash. And at the same time, roll back to, let's say, the founding of the US, there's a lot of the US's founders who said things like government is evil, government is terrible. Okay, well, why are you creating a government if you hate it so much? Well, the answer to that is Absolutely. It was kind of a shrewd idea of, we will get a government. It's inevitable. Someone will come there. So we're going to go there first and just make sure it's the smallest that can exist. So we're going to preempt a greater evil by creating the smallest evil possible, but still evil, but still the smallest possible. That's kind of the idea.
Is governing body the government?
What was that again? I didn't miss the last word.
Is governing body a government? You are mixing two things together.
Sometimes they can be. My definition of government as opposed to a governing body would be the exclusive use of force. As in, if you don't do something, will they come and hit you over the head or take your things? Can they actually use violence and force against you? Now, exclusion from a system is not violence and force. So, for example, if you had a system where you're all part of some, voluntary association, and everyone pays and it maintains public works and things like that, and security and safety and things like that. If you say, I don't want to pay, they should be able to kick you out. Say, no, you don't get any, get out of here. But they can't, steal your money. They can't take from you. They can't hit you over the head. And that's what is a difference between a governing body. Governance and government, there's a slight difference with that. And so, for example, one could say with like cryptocurrency governance, it's decision making on a system that's voluntary to use. So, for example, I don't have to use Dash at all. I could just sell everything I have, delete all the apps, and just be out.
Sell for fiat?
well, or for another coin, doesn't matter. But I could exit at any point. And so if I don't like the decisions made on the protocol, like everyone else who has Dash who votes, if they make a decision I don't like that affects me, like, oh, we're going to change it so that the wallet works this way or the money works that way, or and I don't like it, I can always exit. I'm not forced to participate in the system at all. And of course, if you had that's one thing I think is a lot of people are looking for the one cryptocurrency to rule them all. And I do think that there will be few cryptocurrencies that end up being what the world runs on. But having just a few is better than just one, because one, even if it's a decentralized system, is still a kind of point of failure to a certain extent. It's kind of like when the whole world ran on the gold standard and there was a crash in one with like the Great Depression. It's a crash in all gold standard countries. However, silver standard countries did not have that same effect.
Absolutely, I do think that cryptocurrencies should be like jewels, rubies, whatever, anything, precious metals. Mix them up. The more they are, the better. And maximalists can go to but they are needed as well.
Which is a kind of funny thing to talk about is maximalists. It's funny because maximalism is an interesting concept. I don't know if it exists in a lot of different products. Like you have you have Android versus iPhone users. They don't agree on things. But sometimes some people get a little crazy, but it's not that bad. It's not.
And even Guy Kawasaki, he said, well, I do not use iPhone. He loves his Android phone.
Yeah. So it's not as competitive in tech. It's weird because which is kind of why are we talking on the same show about technology and freedom and government and things like that? Well, because they're very intricately linked in this case. And so, for example, Bitcoin is a social movement as much as it is a technology. And it's a lot of people take that to the extreme and all do the same things and eat a lot of meat and film themselves eating meat and weird things like that. And some people just do like things like that, take it a little bit too far as the culture. But it is a movement of ideas, and people get in, especially if I own this phone and it works, I don't care if everyone else owns it. But with a decentralized network that's a peer-to-peer network, the more people involved, the stronger it gets. And so it's more of a social movement at the same time as a technology. And so people have always survived by staying together, because if you're trying to fight off a lion or a bear or something like that, you're not going to get very far. But if you have a 10 12 friends and they all get together and they all like have rocks and spears, then you can stand a chance. And so it's very ingrained in our brains that we have to stay together to survive. And so if people have this idea that, oh, Bitcoin's great, then they're all together on this idea. And if someone says, well, I'm a Ethereum guy, then they're not, oh, okay, that's fine. Like, no, they see that as another tribe. And then they start changing their mind to all support the same ideas and to hate those people, think those people are wrong. And then there's like a war. It just, people have this natural tendency to kind of do that. And so I think ultimately, I think people will become less tribal about this when it becomes more widespread. But right now it's like a radical movement, a radical social movement. And so right now people get very angry about things and they disagree. But, it's what it is.
The only thing nobody disagrees is Doge, I think.
Yeah, well,
I think. Oh, well,
I've seen a lot of disagreement on Doge. I mean, I think it's funny. It gets used a lot. Like I think Dogecoin gets used more than, Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash together or something like that. Like a lot of people are still using Dogecoin. I don't know why. I have not figured out why or how or who. But
you can move out. You can move out your funds cheaply from exchanges and very quickly.
Yeah.
much quicker and much cheaper than you would do the same with Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. Like Doge is the coin to go for
Yes.
for speed and price.
Yeah, that must be it. That people are just doing that all the time. So it's another one of those things where I think that Doge, like they say, what is the true bit? Which one is the real Bitcoin? I think Doge is the true Litecoin.
Okay.
You don't really need Litecoin if you have Doge, right? Or it's like it's like Litecoin, but a more refined version.
I really like Litecoin.
Yeah.
I don't understand why people say it is useless or what. Who
Yeah.
cares?
Well, again,
you don't need it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that other ones do not need it.
Yes.
Who are you to have a say that something should not exist?
Yes, and that's the other thing is the usefulness of some of these technologies becomes compounded by their actual use in the world based on what's the liquidity like, what's the distribution of the coin supply like. Things like that become more important than the actual technology itself. And so, for example, something that people don't really appreciate enough with Bitcoin, because I feel like when you think about why does Bitcoin have value when its technology is kind of old technology compared to some other projects, I feel like people on both sides of that question have relatively poor understanding. In that, I think a lot of people say it's because it was created immaculately and it's perfect, it's always going to be valuable. It's like, well, that's not exactly true. And then the other side is like, well, it doesn't have value. It's just hype. One of these days it'll all go away. Something very few people I notice say is that it's the mother code base that's still being used as a foundation from a lot of projects. So if Bitcoin disappears, a lot of different projects copy parts of their code, not just one time, like they fork Bitcoin and they're done with it, but they continually put in optimizations and things like that and bug fixes from the Bitcoin code base. They call it backporting. There's a lot of projects that backport to Bitcoin, and as they become, eventually they start to diverge from Bitcoin and start to become their own thing, and they can't backport anymore. But there's a whole lot that still do backport, and especially because I'm sure we see all the bugs and things that happen in Ethereum and people losing money all the time. And it happens very rarely in Bitcoin by comparison. And so it's the oldest, easiest, like has the most work on it, code base. The most work has been done, the most optimizations, the most improvements. And so there's value to that. And also, one thing I had not thought about before, I keep on hearing this like Bitcoin maximalist argument that says like, oh, well, if you had a node from 2009, you ran it today, it would still sync. You could still use Bitcoin. And it's like, who cares? Like I didn't, but then the value in that is that whatever service you have does not break when there's, it breaks when there's an upgrade, right? Every time you have a hard fork, everything you have to update stuff or it won't work. There's a lot of stuff that won't work. And being able to have something that will work forever kind of thing, it has a value because if you build something on it, then you can be sure that it's going to work again in a little bit of time later. So it's that kind of longevity has another piece of value. So anyway.
Joel, 100 minutes in. Such a smart guy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joel, what is the best way to contact you?
I am big on Twitter. I go the Desert Links, and that's probably the biggest place I am. But I'm on Twitter, Facebook, all the different, pretty much everywhere. I have a YouTube channel, Digital Cash Network, and it's also on the Library decentralized content platforms everywhere. But basically, if you look up the Desert Links just about anywhere, you'll be able to find me. And I do check all these platforms frequently, and I'll be able to get back to you.
And to our viewers, please do not rely on one platform only.
Oh yes, always all of them.
Stay decentralized. For example, I'm helping now. I have friends, clients who are going against British gambling industry. They are showing the ugly side of offshores, like, ooh, and they are on war. And I have created their Facebook page and didn't add more admins. My Facebook account now is
It's gone.
no, it is not gone. It is down for the second review, but now I can't access. I can't read messages. People can't send me messages, and for this case, we cannot stream into Host Maria. Yes.
Oh, that's sad.
Well, no, that's reality. Do
Yes.
not rely on the big brands. Ooh, especially
Yes.
when they do not have customer support.
Well, it's of course a good teaser for next
Yes.
time maybe, but I'm sort of helping out with a project of a decentralized social media platform, a new one. So
Let's get them in.
it doesn't exist yet. I'm gonna have to keep it very vague for now. But when it exists, you can just hit me up and I'll be back on to talk about it.
Fantastic. Or just send me. We always talk on Twitter.
Yes, of course.
Fantastic. Joel, such a pleasant, and the voice and the knowledge, absolutely awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yep. Hope you guys have a good one.
And the same to you.
Peace.